these things that we have, this is what opens the doors of the heavens to us to receive more. I mean, in other words, if you can be grateful for what you do have, this is what puts you into a position to receive more and greater blessings. And the reverse of this is that if we're not grateful for what we do have, then this is what basically shuts the doors of the heavens to us, so that not only do we not receive more, but we lose what we do have. And
it'll be taken from us.
It's taken from us. There's a principle that ties in here, which John will often term the economy of the heavens. And one aspect of this principle is that if you have an individual that's incapable of being grateful for a certain level of blessing, then it would actually be completely out of order with the economy of the heavens to give that same individual a greater blessing. Because if a person cannot be grateful for a lesser blessing, then a greater blessing would be completely and totally wasted on that person, because they haven't earned the right to have the greater blessing by first gratefully receiving the lesser blessing.
When I first heard this lesson, that was when I was doing the instructor's course in California by Doug. It occurred to me that it was a very true thing practically, because when I leave from Europe and I'm going back home, I buy presents, and I think all of us do that. I buy presents for my brothers, and there are plenty of them. And when I give these presents, there are a few of them, some of them are very grateful, and some of them who just either take it for granted, or they don't show any sign, or they're not grateful. I mean, Sam and I have gone through this. Then when we are going back the next time, the people who come straight to our minds are those who've been excited about the presents. And it doesn't matter what it has been. And we tend to want to buy for them better things, and because the joy of their being happy about it is what we really feel good about. I just wanted to share that too.
There's a lot more that could, Anita? There's a lot more that could be said on the principle of gratitude. I would really strongly suggest you all try to get a copy of that one book, The Celestial Song of Creation, as well as some of the other books by Annalise Guerin. Particularly, there's one called Ye Are Gods that I'd recommend very strongly, and another one called The Book of Books. I've not read all of the books.
That's one of my favorite ones, is The Book of Books. It's a marvelous book.
Those three, Ye Are Gods, The Celestial Song of Creation, and The Book of Books, I would recommend very, very highly. One just final thought on gratitude. If you look at the word itself, the meaning is right there in the word. It would just be great attitude. Great attitude. I mean, that would be the root of gratitude.
Would you step up here, please? We're about ready. Are you ready? Now, okay. What do I do, Dad? It's what you are about to do. I would like you to deliver a discourse on the cerebral spinal fluid system, the lymphatic system, the blood circulatory system, primarily those three, and the concept of the movement of these fluids separate and distinct from a pumping device.
Yeah, stay over here in Doug's chair and take over.
Can I sit down, please?
Yeah. I want you to listen to this gentleman and see what he has to say. I don't know what he's going to say yet, But I know that he can deliver a discourse on this that will be quite efficacious to everyone's intelligence in this matter.
Ooh. I'm not even... You could have warned me about this.
Then it wouldn't be a good example of putting the screws on you mentally.
Okay. Well, the basic principle that we want to get to here is the natural motion of fluids in their natural state, and this will be a vortexial motion, which I'll put a little diagram up on the board. But basically, when you're coming on a vortex, you have a motion that looks like this. I'll do it sort of top on, or you spiral in towards the center. Now, as a particle or a molecule in the fluid spirals towards the center of a vortex, what will happen is that the velocity or the speed of movement of the molecules in that fluid, as they get closer to the center of the vortex, will increase in velocity. Now, when you get down to the physical formulas behind this, by the time a molecule gets right to the center of the vortex, where then theoretically the molecule is spinning at infinite speed. Now, according to laws of physics, this is simply not allowed. So what happens is there's a discharge of electrical energy, where there seems to be some transmutation of matter into energy, or some energy produced, which can be in small vortexes, maybe about a foot across. You can get a charge there of about 50,000 volts. This is quite significant. Now, there's been quite a few researches over the years, dating way back from about the 1800s, who have researched the motion of blood in the body. Now, I think there was a fella, was his name Harvey, who got very famous from publishing a discourse on the way that the heart pumps the blood, supposedly. Now, there have been several people, some quite recently in Australia, some way back into about the 1830s, and everywhere in between in many different countries, who have decided that it's a physical impossibility for the heart, something around about this big, to be responsible for the pressure gradient that needs to be produced to pump blood through several lots of 10,000 miles of blood vessels. This is considered to be quite untenable according to the current application of physics to the flow of fluids in the body. And so people are trying to work out, well, where does this energy come from to move the fluids in the body? Because the heart is basically a tetrahedral structure if you look at the pattern of overlapping of the muscle tissues there. And this will impart a pattern to the flow of the fluids through it. But in terms of producing the pressure required, the heart is several thousand times too weak to do this, according to some people's interpretations of the understanding of physical laws.
Speak a little louder so everyone can get it.
So, what it then came to was some people reached the conclusion that the flow of fluids in the body was that they were self-animating to a certain degree, where this vortexial motion would produce a charge. And the blood contains large amounts of ions, and there's quite an interaction where the blood then sort of it creates a suction because of the very structure of the tubules through which those fluids in the body have to flow.
Go back and repeat that loudly. I get this.
Now, in your... I'll just come at that from a different angle, meet in the same place. The current model of technology as it exists is one where there is an explosion force used, like a combustion or an oxidation of grosser products to break them down into smaller products, and this is an extremely inefficient form of energy production. Now, with regards to implosion, for example, if we're looking at a particular shape of a copper pipe that has this particular spiral structure to it, or we can duplicate, for example, we can look at natural geometry, we can duplicate the structure of a deer antler, for example. You know how they spiral, like little vortex? Everyone remember seeing a deer antler? Now, that particular structure of pipe, at certain pressures of water flow that are introduced into that pipe, and then the pressure on the other end of the pipe is measured, at certain pressures of water flow for that particular structure of pipe, there'll be some balancing force created between what we could call pressure and suction, where the suction will exceed the pressure introduced into the pipe and the water will come out faster than it went in.
You got that? Go back over that again. This is the principle that I want him to present to you today.
So where we have a vortexial flow of water, the water moving then into the spiralically shaped pipe of the appropriate dimensions and the appropriate geometry, then there will be a suction force produced. As well as the pressure behind the water, there's a suction pulling the water forward. And what we find then is that with certain shapes of pipe at certain pressures, we have an increased energy in that water where it's moving through that vortexially shaped pipe faster out the end than it went in. And so we have an increased suction force, which will be the female principle of motion, compared to the pressure that's pushing the water in.
Can you explain this relative to centripetal versus centrifugal?
A motion away from the center, where if we look at the current state of water supplies, for example, where the water is loaded with chemicals, but also the electronic structure of the water is in such a form that the impurities in the water deposit out into the pipe structure. So in other words, the basic theory behind plumbers could pretty much say pipes clog, pipes clog. Now in living systems, living systems tend to oppose this, and the principles of regeneration oppose this, where those particular compounds that have deposited out on the insides of pipes in what we can refer to as a motion away from the center of the pipe, which will be centripetal, will be reversed, and the tendencies of the water will be one towards increased solvency and spiraling in on itself, which will be centrifugal. And so water that is allowed to flow in its natural patterns will clean pipes. The same water.
Now, explain that relative to the cleansing of the walls of the blood vessels in the body.
Now,
Are these good enough questions to pose to him? Ah, you bet.
Now,
go upstairs, you got it all.
Now, if we go and we look at the bile duct, if we look at the blood vessels, if we look at the walls of the lymphatics, and we can go to several of the studies that have been done at a university in Salzburg, near Vienna, in Austria, I think. And what we find there is that there's a certain, once water has been given this, what we can call implosion tendency, or centrifugal tendency, where it instead of depositing the material out, where its solvency is low, it will have an increased solvency, and it will pull that material into the center and clean pipes out. And this will be the life principle, the suction that we're talking about. Now, in these studies in Vienna, it was found that many old environmental toxins that were not currently testable as being in what we could call the active ecosystem of that particular area, where, for example, DDT may not have been used in that area for about 3-4 decades in that particular country. It was banned pretty early on. And we find that that's not testable in different people's blood or in their urine or their excretions in their body. Now, when they start to take in a particular type of water with this sort of implosion tendency, we find then that the blood vessels clean out and the hardened deposits in the walls of the blood vessels are pulled into the center of the circulating blood, which becomes increasingly solvent, and these impurities are removed from the body. Those particular impurities reverse their polarity and are pulled back in and held within an electron cloud that protrudes off the end of the oxygen portion of the water molecule. The particular impurities reverse their polarity, and from being in a static fixed state within the fat cells of the body and various other tissues, they're pulled. Sorry? Too quick? The impurities in the body reverse their polarity from being in a fixed state where they are deposited in the body tissues.
Would you use that word unipolar versus bipolar?
I'd get out of my depth if I did that.
Okay, go ahead.
But they reverse their overall tendency from being fixed in a static location in the body to where they become mobile again. And these particular impurities then that haven't been in a measurable active form in an ecosystem for maybe 2 or 3 decades then start appearing in people's urine. Okay? All of these old dieldrin and your various types of DDTs and these various chemicals that have been deposited within the fat stores in the body and in the walls of certain vessels, okay, and where we have certain inorganic minerals getting incorporated as kind of an emergency cement repair material in the blood vessels, these things start to get pulled back into the center of the blood flow. And then they start appearing in people's urine because the blood becomes more solvent.
How about hair analysis at the same time?
Haven't read studies on that yet.
Mark it down. Same thing happens with hair analysis. It starts coming out through the hair because it's a means of elimination. And so people get these extremely high hair analysis readings, and they think that something's wrong with whatever they're doing, when actually it's the stuff coming out of their system and coming out through the hair.
Now, there are certain other observations that can be made where the blood vessels clean out, the bile duct cleans out, the gallstones liquefy and are dissolved again by the correct type of water. What else?
Kidney stones.
Oh yeah, kidney stones. The ability of water to hold colloidal minerals, basically the water that has a particular coherent sets of charged particles in it, where the water molecules cluster around the positively charged mineral elements will be highly available to the cellular systems in the body, and the inappropriately charged environmental toxins will be bound up within an electron cloud in the electronic structure of the water. And so they then become unavailable to the body, where they don't get to deposit out into the tissues, but they're held within an inaccessible state within the tissues, clustered with water molecules sort of very stubbornly sitting around them so that they can't interact with any other particles. And this is the research that Johann Grander has done in Austria, and several other people before him, and no doubt others will come after him. Anything else?
Did you have the oxygen bound to 2 hydrogen atoms at roughly 115 degrees, I think, is the positioning of those two hydrogen atoms. Roughly.
Roughly.
And I think that what happens here is that when you have your hydrogen and you have it in the process of oxygen, then the process of hydrogenation, if I can use that expression, is reversed with the oxygen molecule. And you have a softening and liquefying of these elements that is being mentioned here by Kyle, where oxygen must be present for this to take place. Where if you just have the hydrogen elements alone in that presence, then you have a hardening of the material, where the catalyst in the center of this whole operation is your oxygen. Would you like to make comment on that?
The chemical analysis that was done in Salzburg indicates that water that is allowed to flow in this pattern sort of inexplicably, supposedly, to the people testing it, develops close to double the amount of dissolved oxygen. And as it sits there in a glass or a cup, you see all these bubbles all around the edges of the container that it's sitting in.
Now, where did the oxygen come from?
Some people have suggested that a dissociation occurs between the hydrogen and the oxygen in the water molecule, where we end up with an electron-rich water, where we have negatively charged hydrogens in the water, and also an abundance of dissolved oxygen.
Which builds up also with a high degree of, shall I use the word electric charge, within the material, which can be scientifically tested and demonstrated. Is that correct?
As a very large voltage.
Where did that large voltage come from?
As I understand it, there's a translation of the overall spin of the vortex, okay, where the molecules themselves are spiraling. There's a translation from what we could call the long wave into the short wave, where the molecules, each individual molecule is moving in a vortexial motion, and then as it moves into the center of the vortex, each molecule itself takes on a spin. And this then leads to a dissociation between the hydrogen and the oxygen.
You know what we mean by dissociation?
Separation.
It's no longer a molecule of H2O. Okay? You are disassociating those into electrically charged particles, where hydrogen normally, supposedly, according to traditional chemistry, would take on a positive charge, and your oxygen would take on a negative charge. But what we're talking about now goes far beyond that outdated moth-eaten concept. Or what Kyle's talking about, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kyle.
I think I'd finished. I just want to make it clear that what I'm doing here is I'm quoting what I've spent many hours studying and trying to make sense out of. And I spent a lot of money and a lot of time getting this information together. Now, I don't claim to have tested it all. I haven't built the equipment necessary. I don't have that skill in engineering. But I've managed to get hold, I've done my best to try to get hold of the best information that I could. And John's asked me to share that, so I've shared it.
Okay. Kyle, is there anything more you'd like to say, sir? I'd like to say something here while you're thinking about it, okay? Tests have been given which have not been understood by osteopathic people in their testing of cerebral spinal fluid and the cerebral spinal fluid flow. And what they have found is that on this suction principle, or what we'll call the centrifugal centrifugal principle, as you pronounce it. This particular principle results at the end of a cut lymphatic channel where it measures a -6 millimeters of mercury. That is pressure. But it's not a pressure of force, it's a pressure of suction. It's a negative. You're not forcing the stuff through the tube, you're suctioning it out, drawing it out in a manner which is totally foreign to all medical authorities. They don't understand that principle. But this is the same thing that you'll find in your blood vessels, the same thing that you'll find in every single channel through which liquid flows in the human body.
Just to go a little bit further in nature, it's the flow of the water that shapes the banks of the river. It's not the other way around. If you try and straighten out a river, the river starts to kind of become very uncooperative and disorderly, and it overflows. Where, it's kind of the divine love between hydrogen and oxygen and their interaction that allows us to exist in this type of a form. Now, the shape of basically all of the flows of fluids in nature, you'll find, will be spiralic or vortexial. And when you force water to flow in straight lines, it dies. It kind of loses its virtue.
Continue.
Well, they did this to the Rhine in Germany, where we find that just by the vortexial motion of water, there are various phenomena that occur. For example, rocks of a particular shape, like an ovoid shape or an egg shape, will just suspend in water and float on the surface of the water. And there's nothing underneath them holding them up, but they're just sitting there on top of the water because the water's spiraling underneath them. And in Russia and Germany, back around in the 20s, various farmers had used this as a way to cross rivers. They just walked from rock to rock that was floating on the surface of the water, and there's nothing underneath it. Now the rivers have been killed, basically. They've been straightened out in areas to a point where the life in those areas, the biological life, the various plants and animals are no longer healthy. Many of them have died off. And the water that flows through loses its capacity for implosion, and then you end up with a silting up of the edges of the canals and the rivers. And just like in our body, on the earth also, the flow of the fluids has resulted in this depositing out of all of this. What's supposed to be held within the structure of the water is deposited out, and all of the areas then need dredging. Kind of like our bodies. Do you guys here have questions for me? I hope not.
Yeah, I just wanted you to re-explain a bit about how the particles are not pulled off the side, but how the charges is altered when it's just pulled into the middle of the vortex.
I can't go into depth on that. That's a general statement that Grander has in his research, and is stated in other ways by other researchers. But what they all basically seem to say is that the toxins in the tissues, the old deposited toxins, are of a certain type of charge when they're in their fixed state and they're not mobile in fluids. And then the nature of the water is changed and the polarity of the toxin is changed, where it gets then sucked into the center of the flow of the fluid so it can then be carried out of the body. That's as much as I can say about it. I'm just quoting other people's research at the moment. So I honestly, I haven't done all the tests I need to do to answer it in detail.
In the spiraling of the water, I take it that you could actually separate the oxygen from the hydrogen.
Yes?
Right. How does that compare with the reports that one has heard in the past of motor vehicles being run on hydrogen? In other words, doing away with the petrochemical industry and running it on pure water. by separating your hydrogen from your water. Would this be the principle that's been used?
This is one way that they do it. There's a few ways people have tried to do that. Some of them have been with a more primitive type of electrolysis, okay, which isn't such an energy efficient process unless the electricity itself is produced in a vortexial way, which is a much bigger area.
So in other words, what we're talking about here is a possible breaking of the stranglehold that the petrochemical industries have over the human race.
That's the potential of this technology, and so the people have gotten together. I'll avoid mentioning the name of that product that was just on, but there are people using that in China currently to run engines without petrochemicals. And Victor Schauberger did the same thing. This has been repeated and repeated, but the people who have the knowledge lay quite low, and they take a very backyard approach and a very quiet one with regards to the dissemination of their information.
Now let's go quite simply into the biological transmutation of elements. Okay? Now my question to you, sir, it will be this. What is actually taking place when you have this vortex spin between the hydrogen and the oxygen? You are definitely creating more oxygen. Where is it coming from?
I don't feel capable of answering that.
But you have some ideas.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I really don't like discussing ideas till I've tested them fully.
Okay, we're going to present this now as only ideas.
I'm going to start talking and see what floats out of my mouth, okay?
Okay.
Louis Kervran did his research, where the conclusions that he reached was that the different chemical elements in the human body and in other living systems would combine with hydrogens and would combine with oxygens to form other chemical elements.
Hear this, hear this, hear this, and please repeat this because this has been demonstrated beyond any doubt.
In France, Dr. Louis Kervran did some very good experimentation and looked into the transmutation of one mineral element in a living system, including in soils by bacteria, including in us as humans, including in animals, in chickens and cows. Studies over and over again indicating that one mineral element would be changed into another mineral element by a nuclear resonance which is built up, and then the two nuclei of the different chemical elements, the oxygen and whatever else there is, for example a sodium, or the hydrogen and whatever else is there, where a certain resonance is set up, and the two nuclei marry together, where we then have a different number of protons which will constitute a different mineral element in the body. Now when you have a high availability of your negatively charged hydrogens in solution, this then predisposes...
Repeat, please. Now listen, you get this.
When you have a large amount of your negatively charged hydrogens in solution, when these are ingested into a living system, and this predisposes possibly, just as an idea, to the transmutation of certain mineral elements by the addition of one proton and one electron from your negatively charged hydrogen atom. Now, examples of this, just to validate. How much calcium do you think there is in grass?
None.
Well, there's hardly any. Now, What do cows eat? Where does the calcium come from? There's about 3 or 4 different transmutations of different levels of importance there, but the calcium is produced from other mineral elements. If you have certain factory workers in some situations where the measurable level of carbon dioxide in the air around them doesn't alter, but they keep all dying of carbon dioxide poisoning or carbon monoxide poisoning. Carbon monoxide? I've read that in a few years.
No, what she said is correct.
Okay.
The carbon dioxide is there, but they die of carbon monoxide poisoning.
Now, what they found was a resonance would be created between the nitrogen in the air, where simply a resonance would be created and one subatomic particle would move from one nitrogen to the other, where one was then one less on the table of the elements that we talk about in chemistry and forms a carbon, and then the other one is one more and forms an oxygen. And this was occurring in the lung lining from memory in response to the presence of a certain amount of platinum from the materials being worked on in the welding.
As a catalytic agent.
Yes. There are some factory chickens that never have any calcium in their diet at all. And here they are laying calcareous shells around their eggs. And they have no calcium to justify that. But some of them peck at the ground and get a lot of silica, and some of them get a lot of magnesium. And these various transmutations with oxygen and hydrogen are undergone to produce these other mineral elements. That's about all the examples I can remember for now. Any questions?
What did you say about nitrogen?
About nitrogen?
80% of the Earth's atmosphere, roughly, is nitrogen. Now, what did you say about nitrogen when it was heated up in an enclosed container? You didn't say that, but that's part of the problem. What happened when the nitrogen was heated up? What did it become?
Carbon monoxide.
Okay, so you dropped your N2, part of it dropped down in one proton, part of it added one proton, and so it dropped down to carbon on one element and oxygen on the other, creating carbon monoxide, thus poisoning the people that were exposed to that particular gas.
With no measurable change in the air around them. The transmutation occurred in the lung lining.
Now, this is something I want you all to be aware of, is that a transmutation occurred. Now, if that can happen where you can take one element and by simply heating it gently or vibrating it gently with an electromagnetic force, or by dealing with it in using a color frequency, which is a subtle energy level, you can actually take any element and convert that to any other element that you want. That's simple. But with that would be the addition of heat in some cases, or the addition of energy, which we'll call then an endothermic reaction, because the chemical reaction is absorbing heat from the surrounding environment, or an exothermic reaction, where it is going from a more complex element to a lesser complex element, which is giving off heat in the process, and therefore you're adding heat to the environment and having what we call in body electronics an exothermic reaction. So we're having then biological transmutation taking place, right? Mm-hmm. So then what's happening in the vortex of water or fluids in the human body?
It's theoretically possible, some people have suggested, to form any element out of hydrogen and oxygen with the addition of energy produced by the flowing of your various biological fluids. That's the bottom line.
Thank you, sir, and that is the bottom line.
Some people have suggested that it is theoretically and practically possible to produce any chemical element by the combination of your negatively charged hydrogens any chemical element from your negatively charged hydrogens, your oxygen, with the addition of energy produced by the vortexial motion of biological fluids, and I'll add this, with the addition of certain resonant energies which can come from various sources, including color, consciousness, sun, moon, planets, and stars.
Thank you, Kyle. If you want to make an appointment with Kyle, he'd be very happy to take a rain check on that. But what has been presented here is accurate and has been theoretically in the laboratory demonstrated to where there is no question pertaining to the biological transmutation of elements and that which is taking place within the human body. The example, if you take the water, this living water, that Kyle has placed for you in the other room, and you run it through a water pipe that's all full of garbage, what does that living water do, Kyle?
The fluid that runs out from that pipe will run out like milk. And it might do that, for several weeks in the mornings. You just need to run that out until all the pipes clean out. You probably don't want to really ingest what's been cleaned out from the pipes, so just let that milky stuff run out first. But the pipes just clean out. And the boilers descale, so if you start putting it in to make coffee and tea and things, then you find that there's a large amount, the hot tap can really run for a long time until the boilers have descaled.
And what happens then to the human body, sir?
Some people have suggested that the same order will result in the cleaning out of the blood vessels, the bile duct, the urethra, the kidney, and all passages in the human body and animal bodies through which fluid flows.
Now, what does Dr. Kyle Grimshaw Jones suggest?
Let me say this. I have a vested interest in this company, and it's not the only one working with water. But I'm fundamentally useless now because they pay me. Okay? So don't trust me.
What does Dr. Kyle Grimshaw Jones suggest at this point of time?
I would do my best to drink water that had been given the characteristic of implosion, as opposed to explosion, of centrifugal force rather than centripetal motion.
Do you know of any company that's doing that at the present time?
Yeah, I know one.
Would you like to repeat it for the audience's sake?
Okay. Well, we got a living water video and a living water book back there, which we better show that video sometime now that it's shown up again. And you can observe several case histories that are written in the book. There's a lot more research that's just been translated that's come out of Austria that I haven't managed to get hold of yet. But I believe that this material is very worth investigating, where you'll find its application in living systems validates its efficacy where a couple of lakes in Czechoslovakia, for example, have been restored, which were destroyed by acid rain, where there were no plants and no fish, and it was biologically dead. Both of those lakes are now full of life, full of fish, full of plant life. You can put a little sprig of parsley in it, and it doesn't go brown for a very, very long time. In fact, sometimes it stays green and grows roots. Or one control that's placed 2 meters away from it to avoid the water undergoing entrainment through its proximity. You have to have different water a fair way away, otherwise it starts to get affected. But a bit of parsley shoved in that goes brown in a couple of weeks.
Now, to put you on the spot, sir.
Oh, you haven't done that yet?
No. But to put you on the spot, sir, how many of you folks out there would like to see this tape that we've just found? Okay, sir, when do you want to play it?
I think we've got some priorities this week on the weekend.
We have priorities? How about on the weekend?
No, hang on. Some people have got things on the weekend.
There's lots of things on this weekend.
So
But when is there a time that we could do this?
Neville has suggested doing it one evening.
Okay, one evening? That we can do. How about, say, Thursday evening?
All right.
Done? How's Thursday evening? After dinner? How long will the tape take?
I think it's only about 40 minutes.
How long will Kyle take?
I think I've taken. Now there are 3 other videos that are up here that are currently in Keith Yarker's possession. Sorry to drag you into it, Keith. There's 6 hours of lectures there on Victor Schauberger's work from Callum Coates. I think there's about another 2 hours of lectures on vortex dynamics from Dan Winter. There's quite a lot of information to absorb there that could be shown if it was desired, but I think that people's enthusiasm may wane if they have to look at 9 hours of research on water.
How about Thursday evening after dinner?
Fine.
Fine. Would you take responsibility for that?
I can do that.
Okay. Anita's gotten the schedule. All right, folks? All right. I don't think... Now, the body's 80% plus or minus water. Some people go as high as 87% on their estimates. Now, the thing is, so there's a lot of water in this body. If we put impure water into our system, according to the bioelectric Vincent technique of France, then we die. If we put living water in our system, we live. And I think you have a copy of that bioelectric Vincent material.
I do.
And I think that's something that everyone should look at, because if you drink the wrong type of water, it will cause cancer in the human body.
I don't have that material here.
You don't have it, but you have it. Okay. But that material still should be something that you should eventually look at. But this will solve the problem, this particular equipment. Okay, sir? I'll
write that up now as a phone number and a name, okay?
Okay, we got a phone number and a name for Kyle.
Mention my name and they might pay me.
You mentioned that the energized water by drinking the energized water that's been through the vortex, it'll help lift things off the walls of vessels in the body. Yep. What's to stop your body doing that because of the natural vortexes in your body?
The body will begin to do that as water that has the electronic structure of the water is restored somewhat by the addition of certain types of colloidal minerals. Okay? Now, that energy will be imparted to the water, and those energies will be present to begin the process of dissolution. But the body will still have to expend its own energy in making what we could say dead water into what we could call cellular water. And so there's an expenditure of energy that needs to occur there, where the body will have to spend tremendous amounts of electrons trying to restore that water to what we could call cellular water. And we're trying to get past that need, that kind of energy drain.
Thanks, Kyle. Kyle, I think the water, I don't know, I've only heard rumours here, I haven't really spoken to you about it, that it's quite expensive, this machine. And I think I heard other people say, oh, there are very cheap machines about. So could you say something about that, please? Perhaps the difference between an expensive one and a cheap one and whatever. Thank you.
That little one I got is $1,500 worth, not including tax. A lot of money. Now, there are many other devices that are supposed to be around for treating water. And some of them may be very effective. I don't claim to have tested all of them. I've tested some of them. I'm not going to mention any product names because it's not appropriate. But everyone's going to be responsible for testing the things themselves to look into the effects. Now, Keith's got some very good possibilities, which he's looking into, where the same effects may be able to be done at less cost. That's quite possible. I don't claim to understand fully the construction of these units. I think they have several varieties of metals in them, which are of the purest grade that you can buy. Which, you might say copper is cheap. Well, copper is cheap, but pure copper isn't. And so there are many different ways of testing water, and some of the equipment I don't have yet. And so I'm still looking into this, but I kind of got plunged in the deep end. And so people can look into it. I'll have a talk with Ian, and if you mention to Ian, the fellow with the company EcoWorld, which I'll put on the board, you mention to him you're involved in body electronics, and I'll work on getting something together with him so that the relevant information with regards, for example, to the blood tests from Salzburg and so on can be mailed out to people, and the other information people can look into. But I haven't found anyone else who is doing what we could call bioremediation, where they're applying their technology on a large level to the rejuvenation of ecosystems such as lakes and so on. That validates it for me beyond anything else that I could look into. I don't know of anyone else that's doing that. It's possible that they are doing that. But the same company is also working on digesting oil spills and various types of man-made pollutants which don't normally exist in the ecosystem, and they're working at that using cultures of different types of bacteria. And that's the other half of their work, where they combine the energized water, the living water, with various types of bacteria. And so I've developed a tremendous amount of respect for Granda's research, but that doesn't mean that other people aren't doing very good research and haven't come out with something practical. I haven't found anything that's impressed me as much as this yet.
Thank you. I have some friends that actually gave me a lot of this literature about 6 months ago, and it's still sitting where they gave it to me. I haven't even attempted to read it. They also informed me that to store water, the only article that really retains its life for any period of time is an amphora. Have you come into that information?
The water will hold a charge for quite a period of time, this particular water. Certain vessels of certain types of materials have a particular affinity for water, and certain geometries of form of the storage vessel will have a particular affinity as well, particularly those that have a tetrahedral overlapping kind of shape. Or a heart shape. There are various types of vessels that people have looked into for that. But the water will stay charged testably for quite a period of time, longer than I've ever wanted to continue the test anyway. I think I tested it for about a month once, and it kept its certain characteristics.
Yeah, well, that's probably similar to what they said. I mean, I've got water that hasn't been tested, but I mean it's cascading all down the creek, and apparently put into an amphora from those situations, the water stays alive. Put it in what we normally put it in, and it's ratchet, An amphora were used by the Phoenicians and most of those people prior to the BC, AC, 2,000 years ago plus. They're big, tall things with a pointed bottom, you know, you can't stand them up. And they're usually made of clay. These people actually gave me one made of clay to use. The only fault that I noticed after they'd given it to me, and I never discussed it with them then, the water must be flat on the top of the jug. It's round at the sides and it's pointed at the bottom, but whatever you do with water, it always comes out flat at the top.
Number one question, does this machine just use normal tap water? Good old polluted stuff.
The study's done. Now, I haven't put my mind to rest at this yet. That's why I wouldn't have spoken about it. But the studies in Salzburg were done with tap water, where they found that not only what was taken in came out and was bound up, but a whole bunch of other stuff came out as well, because the nature of the water itself had changed. Where the impurities were still there, but they were not available to a living system. Now, I'm still wrestling with that idea mentally. Some people suggested you purify the water, then you mineralize the water, then you energize the water. Some people say, well, that's totally unnecessary. Just energize it, the impurities are unavailable, that'll be just fine.
So when you say the impurities are unavailable, does that mean they'll just pass through our system, or do they just drop out of the water?
That's what some people have said. Now, I can't make that claim, and I'm still not sure that I'm fully happy with that. But I haven't found an exact way to test it yet.
Number two question. Bearing in mind that Homo sapiens is not basically a drinking creature, how does the water that this machine produces compare with what we would get just from a fresh and raw diet? In terms of how it acts inside the system, does the water we get from the fruit and veggies have the same effect?
If you observe this water when it's sprayed, you know when you take water from a hose and you put it on plants, have you noticed how the droplets form on the leaves? And then you look at rain and you notice how the droplets form on the leaves. You've seen the difference? Okay. When you put this water on the leaves out of a hose, once it's been charged, it sits on the leaves like rain. So that suggests to me that it would be very compatible with living systems, as best as I can tell, just from the fact that fish that were dead before like it. So, I mean, that's the bottom line for me. The details I'm still finicking with.
Hey, dude. Kyle, you familiar with Alvin Crosby's work?
I know Alvin.
Yeah. I spent a couple of years with him as well, and I think we talked about this a little bit last year. Mm-hmm. What you're sort of explaining is very interesting, because if you're able to transmute, if you like, the particles or contaminants in the water and make them solvent or dissolved, so to speak, within whatever body, then how does that compare to, for instance, charging the water with a certain magnetic field, where you are changing the electrostatic or oxygen levels, where you're changing and altering the pH, you're changing the structure, you're altering the charge as well? How does that compare to like vortexual water? Because the same, we've done a lot of tests and research on magnetically treating water as well, where you can get accelerated plant growth and you can cleanse a lot of toxins out of the body. And I'm thinking the same thing's happening here, but what I'm thinking is that the vortexual water is somehow dissolving the particles back within itself so that they pass straight through the system.
Mm-hmm. This has been suggested.
Yeah.
With Alvin's work, what Alvin has done, I had no idea this was going to go on so long. Water has memory. It remembers tumbling over rocks that formed, and as they cooled, they formed along magnetic lines of force, according to the Earth's field. And so as the water moves over these rocks, it becomes entrained with the memory of the Earth's magnetic field. It also absorbs energies from the sun and from the different planets that reflects the sun's rays back down onto the surface of the Earth. Now, in NASA, the NASA people did some experiments with water where they basically sent electromagnetic energies into the water. They left it for a year. And this ties in with the other question. They left it for a year and they came back. They put contacts onto the sides of the fish tank and they drew out all of the information that they'd put into the water, where it was understood that this information would be stored along the linkages between the oxygen and the hydrogen atoms in the water. Now what Elvin does, because I have a lot of respect for Elvin, he puts it through a buffeted magnetic field from memory where the two south poles are pointing at each other from about 4,000 Gauss magnets, and then he ozonates the water. Now he puts it through the magnetic field so that the two magnets would be repelling each other apart with force. And that force is then imparted into the water to cancel out the memories, which some people have suggested have been used for sinister controlling tricks from various three-letter bureaucracies.
Yeah.
Yeah. But all the electromagnetic patterns stored along those resonant linkages are erased. And so that's what Alvin's doing. My question is, once you've erased it then, how do you re-imbue it with the patterns of the planets and of the Earth's field? And that's what Grandeur claims to have done, to actually give it back those particular natural energies by entrainment, by an entrainment process where there are two oppositely charged, highly charged fluids contained within the casing of his units, along with the flow form and different metal structures. And so that's been the next step for me in my mind so far.
Because what Alvin...
And he ozonates it.
Yeah, what Alvin put together was just a system that you could bolt onto the pipes of your house, say at the point of entry, and it'll dissolve all the gunk out of your pipes and out of your hot water cylinder and what have you, and your plants will grow a lot quicker when you water your garden.
And it gives people fevers too.
Yeah.
I drank it consistently for about 3 months, and after 4 years of work, I finally got a fever.
Healing crisis fever or a disease crisis fever?
They seem to be a healing crisis fever from what I could observe.
Yeah.
Well, the fella had brownish greeny eyes, and now he has greeny bluey eyes, one of the guys that was doing it. So they seem to be, from what I could observe, an advancement, but I didn't muscle test it at the time. And I haven't got access to it anymore.
What the sort of work I looked at with Alvin as well was research done by Albert Roy Davis, where he used different strengths or different Gauss levels or ratings of different magnets for the accelerated growth of different seeds or different plants.
I've read that also.
And what Alvin had come across is a certain strength of magnet that would, and of course a certain pole, that would charge the water, take away its memory, but also filter out or purify out the impurities as well, and give you a lot of, living water, in other words.
Sounds wonderful.
I'm just wondering how the
living water studies on plant growth and on where they're farming different types of fish and farming different types of abalone in New Zealand and so on. These indicate increased growth rates up to between 30 and 50%.
Yep, that's the same as the research we got too, 40%. I'm just thinking it's the same thing happening here. We're playing with magnetic fields. We're playing with altering the pH and the charge of the water.
Sounds like the same principles.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind looking at that stuff. But I was just wondering what you felt about how the vortexual water is imploding the particles within themselves, and can you say turning them into say submicron size where they're just passing straight through, or maybe even being beneficial to the system, to a living system?
The way I understand it is the water molecules, say you have an impurity here, the water molecules sit around it, so it's then inaccessible. Not only that, it doesn't get to move out from the center of the blood flow. It stays in the middle of the blood flow. It doesn't get to move out to the cell level. You understand? It simply doesn't become available. That's as best I understand it at present.
Say that last sentence.
Where the impurities in the water, instead of being sent out in a centripetal action to deposit on the outsides of the vessels and moving out through then to the cells, it's held then and pulled and then held within the center of the flow of water.
You're saying it's pulling it out the other direction.
Yeah.
Okay, continue. And then you had another sentence.
Did I?
Yeah.
Best I understand it, bottom line, is that where you have the water flowing along like this, in the center of the flow, the impurities will be kept in the center of the flow. And the other impurities out here will be drawn into the center of the flow, where the various colloidal minerals and so on have more bioavailability, but the toxins become stuck within the center of the flow.
Are the toxins or the particles within the center, are they broken down to colloidal size? Like, are they reduced in their size as well during that process?
Then we have to get on to talking about the inversion of bacterial growth rates once the water has been energized, and the function of the various organisms that are in all water, unless it's dead, at different temperatures. And I don't claim to fully understand that yet. But basically, once water has been energized, you'll find that the bacteria in the water, as it approaches body temperature, the growth rate will get less and less until once it reaches body temperature, there's no more bacteria left. And they're associated with the breakdown of these environmental toxins. But that's a real big area I'm not qualified to talk about, but Grant has researched that.
Okay, well, if you're taking this, say, tap water with all the contaminants in it, and you run it through this system you have, then when you analyse the water at the other end, are the contaminants like fluoride and chlorine and all these other sort of particles, are they still in that water, or have they broken down into a smaller size, or do you then purify them out using mechanical
Those studies are currently being done. But if you take, for example, chlorinated water, where you can smell the chlorine, really obviously, and you energize it, then you can't smell it. You take a chlorinated pool, you energize it, you dive in it, it doesn't sting your eyes. And so I don't know exactly what's happened there.
So, because I mean, what I'm thinking is if it's working the way I think, it's transmuting all the elements and putting them back to the void, so to speak, or transmuting them back into hydrogen and oxygen.
Quite possibly.
So if you just had a little tube, you wouldn't need a filter.
Quite possibly.
You got anything to say about that, John? I mean, you know, biological transmutations, if...
Well, I'm looking at it, and the word that keeps coming to my mind, universal solvent. And this would be exactly what it is. You're dealing with a universal solvent. Now, a solvent will break something down so it's no longer clinging to the walls of the artery, so to speak, but it puts it into kind of like a biodegradable material where you have it, it's captured. The picture I keep getting through my mind is that you have, I don't understand it, okay, I just want to make this clear. It's not clear to me yet. But what is clear is that it is a universal solvent, and your oxygen, your water molecule in some way attaches itself to this material, thus creating a molecule which is not yet chemically combining with the material, but holding it in a solution to where it by itself is no longer toxic to the human body. Pardon? It is changing the charge by uniting with the water molecule. In other words, you're creating a molecule which would be like in a water molecule, you know, where you have I'm trying to remember the old name of it, where you have water in a molecule, but the water is still in a certain form, but it's still water, and you heat that particular chemical and the water comes off. The same thing would be true here. The water is hanging on to the substance, but hasn't lost it hasn't lost its identification as water.
There is a nice diagram in the book showing the electron cloud that protrudes off the ends of the water molecules, how the molecules line up in approximately a tetrahedral arrangement in 3 dimensions, and
that's it.
And how the
that's exactly it, because it's holding it in that tetrahedral form. Yay, you got it.
And so that's
simple.
That's drawn.
That's it.
Well, that's drawn there in the book, so you can have a look at it if you want.
And that's exactly the answer as to how it holds it, not as a molecule itself, but in a configuration which makes it chemically non-toxic to the human body. And that's it. It's a universal solvent is what we're working with here. That I know.
Thank you, Kyle. That's been really instructive. There's just a few little things there that might be helpful for people. I've been doing biodynamics for about 12 years now, and we mix the water for an hour, and we turn it one way until we get a hole in it, a really deep hole, and then we reverse and you sit there and you're actually meditating on it.
I used to do that.
Okay, now I'd like to just talk about that for a minute, because what I've noticed is, like when I've been using colour therapy, for instance, it works splendidly on animals, but then we have a big variation with humans. And my feelings are this: the animal has no attachment to anything. You're working on an animal, you do something in a colour therapy way to the animal, immediately you get a response. But with a human, because of their thought process, we lose it. Now, if you apply that same principle to what we're doing now, to the livening of water, some people claim that you by meditating with a glass of water, you can actually energise it. Now, have you any information on that? Because the Kirlian photography proves that. We know that the water will be enhanced by our focusing. So, and we're talking about quantum physics now.
With a spectral, what they call a spectral interferometer, they've done various studies. Now, a friend of mine knows the gentleman that did these studies. His name, from memory, is Cyril Smith in England, where various tests were done in France. Does everyone recall where let me know if I'm boring you. Does anyone recall the tests that were done in France that showed that water retained memory and influenced the white blood cells' immune response? It was published in Nature magazine. Well, the people that did those studies, which were funded by the French government to finally disprove the fact that energies had any effect on biological systems, and they ended up showing that they did, which was a bit embarrassing. So the people from the board for scientific fraud went round to the people that had done the studies that got published in Nature magazine. And they showed up with a magician and someone else and someone else. And so Cyril Smith went later on because these people invalidated the original study. And they wrote a little article in Nature magazine invalidating that study, which in my eyes is perfectly valid. And what happened was Cyril Smith went in and measured the radiations that were given off by the skeptical board of examiners that were present for the experiment. And it was shown that the vibrations coming off the skeptical minds that were, they're basically just vested interests that didn't want to have their belief system shaken, had influenced the structure of the water molecules. And it's gotten to such a stage at this point in time where you can take a glass of water, hold it in your left hand for a minute, test it again with interferometry, and it will appear with a completely different spectrum of wavelengths, which is reproducible and testable. And so it gets to the point that Cyril Smith has reached the conclusion that we are basically sensitive to fields of the same order of strength that we give off, which are extremely, extremely subtle influences.
Repeat that again, please.
Cyril Smith's bottom line conclusion is that we are sensitive to energies of the order of magnitude that our body generates. That's extremely small. So yes, the water has memories and it will be influenced by being touched. It'll be influenced by fluorescent light shining on it. It'll be influenced by what you're thinking when you're holding it, all measurably. Now,
the qualities in the vortex water that you have, are they the same as if you took the water out of a mountain stream?
I don't know how to test that. All I can tell you is the things that would be wanting to live there seem to enjoy living there again if they couldn't before. So it seems to have a life-giving quality as testable in the environment. But I don't know how I would ever test a mountain stream. Mountain streams basically are self-cooling. I haven't mentioned this. They're self-cooling. They flow along longitudinal vortices until their pattern of flow is interrupted by tampering with the landscape, where their vortices then become transverse and they eat away at the edges of the rivers. Instead of they end up directed at right angles to where they should be, and this is why the rivers that they try and change their course are interfered with. Now, the water that's flowing along in a natural stream, if you can ever find one these days, because as the trees around the stream are chopped down, the temperature gradient between the water and the earth is changed, where the flow then of the stream is no longer vortexial. Now, along with this vortexial observations, you'll find that in what was a live stream back in around about the 20s or 30s in Germany, where the moss on the rocks in a stream would point upstream, seemingly against the flow of the water. Now, as the stream gradually died, the tendrils on the moss on the rocks, the algae, would gradually turn around to 90 degrees, and eventually it would be facing downstream. And Victor Schauberger would call that dead, where that stream was now dead. Now, I've never been able to match his original observations of a living stream with any stream that I've been around anywhere in the world so far that I've been. And that, you know, if you read Victor Schauberger's work, if you want a shock of conscience, and you know, the people with AIDS in Tanzania might shock you, but when you realize that Mother Earth is dying because of the way the water on this planet has been treated, then you'll get a real shock. I had a healing crisis for 3 weeks. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I didn't know what I could do about it. But if you want to look into that further, there's a lot of information available from, everyone know the fellow that sells the Naclo? Bob O'Sullivan? Tully? He's changing his name to Noah. Well, he's down there with the Astronet in Byron Bay, and they have a lot of Victor Schauberger's research there. But I wouldn't call what you get in streams today living really the way it used to be, because the trees have been knocked down, the temperature gradient of the ground has changed relative to the water, and now the water is not flowing the same way that it used to.
Thank you.
At home, formerly, when I was growing, we did not have tap waters, but we got waters from spring that came out of stones, and it took quite some time to be able to collect it. And we used to store the water in what I just heard David describe. We have a big clay pot. We still do now, and that is what we call it's like an oval shape, you know, with a small opening at the top where we pour in the water and we stand it on the floor and that kind of stuff. What kind of water would you say that is? But now, I don't know, we have now tap water that has been taken from a waterfall. I think you can continue with it.
I think actually, if you observe carefully, those pots which were used for water storage, which we call ching, they could not stand on their own because they were actually designed in the form of an egg shell.
That's correct.
So they had to make what we call a cut. That's you take leaves and make a hole She can demonstrate what a cut is, in order to put the container on it for it to stand. And so this water will be put in one corner, in a cool corner, and that's used for drinking water.
And it would be kept out of the sun, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly, inside the house,
right.
at a very cold corner.
Yeah, there's a lot of ancient traditions around that, around the egg shape, and around using natural forms, natural geometries, which are derived from nature, to like horns. Some people use horns to contain the water.
My question is, would you say that the spring water was better than the nowadays tap water?
Well, it depends on the pollution of the groundwater table in the area that you're in. But
no, I mean actually where I'm talking about, we don't know anything about fertilizers or...
Wonderful.
That
Well,
kind of stuff.
it's possible then it would have minimal pollution, and depending on the way it flowed, on how much of the trees have been removed from that area or not, then it could be very good flowing water.
Yeah, because my question is based on whether we should encourage the people to go back to taking water from the spring or continue with the tap water, because we won't be able to afford, not yet, for the majority of people, a good supply of water.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't have the water here to test it, and I don't even have all the type of testing equipment that I want. So to test it as thoroughly as I want, because I have this pattern where I'm never really satisfied. There's always one other test I could run. So I'm not, I can't really, it sounds like you've got good water there, but I don't know. I can't see it or test it right now. Bless it.
Because what you and John have just been talking now is mind-blowing. I mean, it's like there's no end to possibilities of changes in matter, in whatever. You take something, you shake it the other way, and you have something else. Scary.
I'd like to applaud everything that's been said here about water. I think there's a lot more research to do yet. But bottom line, God gave us these as cups to drink through. And if you drink water through your hands, that is potentizing it to your particular body.
That's measurable, folks. I go now?
Okay, Kyle, I want to thank you very much for your presentation. Okay. Now, is there any question that any of you have concerning the importance of water? I don't think we need to discuss this much further. Yes?
Water in Europe is a especially bad problem, which you probably know, John. So that's our biggest problem, really, something I don't really know what to do about at all. We've heard a bit about reverse osmosis, or people talking about that, but we're not really sure whether this is the answer. I mean, we've got to do something with our water. Well, we're going to energize it, but I'm not very happy about just doing that because our water's so polluted, I think. So what about reverse osmosis? Could you say something about that?
I have dealt with reverse osmosis for years. Okay, we used to purchase 100 machines at a time for the people involved in body electronics. But I had arrangements made with Universal Water Labs where they would test the validity of the membrane that they're using in the reverse osmosis unit. And we'd have, in some cases, 100% rejection. Sometimes 98 membranes out of 100 would be rejected because they did not measure up to the advertised specifications where they said this is what this particular unit will do. And membrane after membrane, hundreds of them after hundreds of them were rejected because we could not get a good source of membranes. And as far as I can tell you in all sincerity, I don't believe that the problem has been solved for quality of membranes unless you have them tested from universal water labs. And that's the only one that we have found that will guarantee the quality of performance on your reverse osmosis equipment. There's a lot of hype out there, but the equipment is no better than tap water in many cases.
So have the ones that you get, I think you can get them at Enzymes International or something, have they been tested or not?
I have been away from Enzymes International for about 9 years now. I don't know what they're doing. Pardon me? Yeah, but I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what the quality is. Because when I did the quality testing myself, I knew what the quality is. And I no longer know what the quality is because I'm not there to make sure things are running smoothly.
I've purchased some time ago water filter the same as Lou has and the one Brooke recently received from Enzymes International. Maybe some of you who might be interested could have a look at it. And when you purchase it, you see that it has been tested and everything. And I asked for a test, so they send you a tube where you can test the water. They give you 2 little tubes where you put one the tap water and other the water that has been run through the filter. You send it up and they either fax you or send you a whole sheet of what was in it and what was after. And my unit was about 96% accurate. So what I know is that even lately now, Universal Water Lab tests their own equipment before they sell it. It's not like they just sell your product. They really test it to see if it does the specifications. Lewis might have some more information. I don't know. Yeah, they test every unit.
They test every single unit.
Every single unit, because Enzymes International gets the equipment from Universal Water Lab.
Now they have kept the manufacturers honest in putting out high-quality membranes rather than just mass manufacturing, which has been done in the past, which have given many, many people very bad quality equipment.
Right. Thank you very much. The second question is, I believe reverse osmosis takes everything out of the water. Is that right?
Reverse osmosis does not take out everything. This is what the advertising says. It is not true.
Oh, so does it take out all the heavy metals and...
It takes out a certain percentage.
Yeah. And
but it does not take everything out as they advertise.
And then it takes out the minerals and things like this. So, I mean, they're things that we don't need at all. Is that right? I mean, because they're not the right type?
It gives you better water than what you had before. But I do believe that if you can get a source of fresh water, then you are a wealthy person, because water is one of the most important things you can get for your ultimate survival.
Would you say that of all the things then that reverse osmosis is the best? I mean, if we're going to have to use something because the water is polluted?
I wouldn't say that I know that answer.
Okay, thank you.
There's another alternative. There's a small company in the States that makes a still that has a fundamentally different design than most other stills. And it's about a $700 unit. You can plug it into your kitchen sink, and it's about so big. And it turns out about 20 gallons a day. And it makes water that's 10 times more pure than a $12,000 Corning laboratory still. And if you put a extended contact time charcoal block before it in line, you get out the dissolved gases like your chlorine, and then it will take out all the solids. So it's a very, very pure result. And it comes out charged, as is evidenced by root growth studies. You get sprouts growing twice as fast grown in this water.
Matthew, thank you. What's the name of that?
It skips my mind this at the moment. I would put it up on the board if I remembered. I didn't bring any of that information with me, but anybody's interested could contact me through my address, and I'll make sure I get the information to them.
Thank you very much, sir. Peter, we're going to get to the sclera, and we're going to continue on with the sclerology. And basically, this is different than the greenish blue spots or the blue spots that we use for the thymus or that we use for the heart area in the medial and lateral portions of the sclera. Now, these particular blue spots we're speaking of will be little blue spots that will be isolated or at the end of a blood vessel and so on. And those can be anywhere throughout the sclera of the eye. Now, we do have a problem. And I want to go over this with you very carefully because evidently in our discussion on the blue spots on the sclera, we didn't make it clear as to what it meant. Can we turn that off there, Anita, please? Now, I want to talk for a few minutes on these blue spots. And if you get the little book by Morishita on a cure for cancer, which you had from the first weekend, you have that, and it talks about the red blood cells. It talks about nutritional factors. It talks about how these things are manufactured in the small intestine area. And it talked about how if your nutritional factors, your digestion is off, or if your assimilation factors are off, then you come out with the leukemia problem because you have an incomplete white blood cell being created properly from the red blood cells that are manufactured in the monera of the lining of the small intestines. Now, according to Dr. Stu Wheelwright, who discovered this, I believe, and I think credit should be given to him for this concept, he observed over many, many years the sclera of the eye, and he found out that people who had at least 3 or more blue spots in the sclera of each eye would have the symptoms of leukemia. And the symptoms of leukemia would be an extreme tiredness. Now, I think that extreme tiredness is missing here in this class from the observance of what's been going on the past several days. And the people who are, they're out and going and going and going and going and to the wee hours of the morning. And so this, evidently these blue spots are disappearing that were in so many people's eyes, say, shall we say, 3 weeks ago. Anyway, the leukemia aspect is not a problem because all you have to do is to correct the digestion of the individual and correct the assimilation of the food going into the small intestine, and then you'll have the proper manufacturing of the red blood cells. And then with that particular material happening, then you will not have the problem with the incomplete white blood cells, which indicate your leukemia problem, according to Dr. Morishita. Now, that work you need to look at. Now, if you have the blue spots in the sclera, this will also be associated with the spleen. And there will be oftentimes feelings of, I can't do this and I can't do that, which will be spleen related. And at this point in time, oftentimes the spleen under the rib cage on the left side, directly opposite from the liver, and actually coinciding to some degree with the left lobe of the liver, the spleen oftentimes will be swollen in situations where you have leukemia. And this would also tie in to some degree with the interference with the red blood cell activity, the ability of the spleen to break up and reabsorb back into the body the red blood cells. Now, The spleen aspect is a psychological aspect wherein we feel the feeling of apathy. Now remember, the feelings have nothing to do with logic. We just feel apathetic. We just simply feel that I can't do this, or I feel I can't do that. And this feeling is only a feeling, but it's an identifiable feeling, and we identify with the word pattern of I can't, which qualifies the God energy in each person to where they are no longer able to perform in any given area where the I can't is in existence. So here's for educating the people pertaining to the apathy, the word pattern surrounding apathy, which is in the denial of their own ability to perform or do things at their level of progression, and give a person a chance to transmute that word pattern, that they might rise above the apathy level and get up into the level of grief, where things become even more victimized and more powerful outflow of energy. Any questions on this? Any comments on this? Anita, is there anything you want to say on this at all? Nothing? Okay, you sure? All right. Now, Anita does a lot of, I'm sure there must be something you could say on that, because you're dealing with people all the time on this very project. What do you tell people to do?
Supplement-wise, is that? Well, if we look at supplements, we look at the blue spots as a lack of enzymes and minerals in the body. So that's the first thing I tell them to do, is to get on some enzymes and minerals the minute I see this. Now, you also realize, because they have this I can't word pattern, a lot of them will find every excuse in the book why they can't take the enzymes and minerals. So it's like a catch-22. You have to, make sure they're taking the enzymes and minerals. I constantly check up on them, because a lot of them, they have this I can't, and they'll find every conceivable reason in the book why they can't take them.
And why they shouldn't take them.
Or why they shouldn't take them, and even though they're sitting right in front of them. So you have to be conscious of that.
Okay, now this is important, because in dealing with people, the first thing that they do is refuse to be responsible. And they can't do this, and they find every justification for not taking a supplement. They find every justification for not taking care of themselves. They find every justification as to why they can't do this or can't do that. And when you talk to them a month later, they haven't really taken any supplements at all. And they still feel tired and worn out. Their gums are still bleeding, and they're still bruising all over their body. And they say, yes, sir, we're on the program. Well, what are you doing? Well, I'm taking a little ripe pawpaw once in a while. Or are you taking it green? Well, I can't stand it. I can't stand it when it's a mature green. I have to have it ripe. And all you do is shake your head, because you realize here's somebody who is at apathy level, where you actually have to hold them by the hand and have them do things because they are incapable, responsibility-wise, of doing it on their own. Any comment?
No.
Doug? Okay.
Ian, you have a question?
With regard to those blue spots, you said that the small intestine is or the area of the body that's responsible for clearing that out or working with leukemia. What what is the specific way to get the small intestine healthy? You said enzymes and minerals, but is there any other? I mean, I may have missed this with information overload over the previous weeks, but I just wondered if you could go over it again that's specific for the small intestine.
Oftentimes, psyllium seed will help to scrub out the mucus lining of the small intestine. Colonics will be very good for the large intestine, but won't necessarily help the small intestine, except for the fact that you're ridding the body of a lot of toxins, which would use up other nutrients, which would neutralize all that stuff coming out of the large intestine. Sometimes you can use alfalfa tablets, and the alfalfa will help to scrub out that material. So there's a mechanical thing that we can use then, psyllium seed and alfalfa, ground up alfalfa leaves, which will help to scrub out mechanically the lining to the small intestines. Now, if there's a little constipation problem, a little bit of aloe vera juice will help, because that will also be very healing to the mucous membrane. Your white oak bark is very, very good because that helps to heal the mucous membrane. There's different types of herbs, herbal formulations you can use to help to heal the lining of the intestine, like LBS2 and things like this, which will help you out considerably. But bottom line, what is the word patterns that would be associated with the intestines? I can't go, I can't move. And when a person can eliminate, I like that word, eliminate the I can't goes and the I can't moves and things like that from their system, then suddenly they have a cleansing action which is unexcelled. Because when the person lets go on a mental level, then the emotions let go and the physical body lets go. So you have all of these things to consider on that level. Now, when the intestines are cleaned out then you can start recognizing that they can absorb the nutrients in the food that you're taking in. And then you'll have your healthy regeneration of the red blood cells that are made in the minera or the walls of the small intestines. And then the leukemia comes to a screeching halt. The person is no longer bruising heavily. They're no longer bleeding at the gums, and they're no longer suffering from this bone-chilling tiredness. Does that help you, Ian? Okay, Rebecca?
It was said to me by one of the naturopaths that I did some work with that psyllium was too harsh on the intestinal tract. I wondered if you could comment on that, and is it beneficial to take it more than once a day?
I have never heard it stated by any knowledgeable people that psyllium is harsh on the intestinal tract. I have never heard that. I have now. I have heard that that sometimes if you don't take enough water with it or liquid with it, it sometimes will cause a little constipation. But you've got to take a lot of water and take a lot of liquid with that psyllium, and then it moves through there and does its job. But frankly, Ian, we've used it for years, and I've never heard that type of a radical statement that any naturopath would ever make, that it's harsh on the intestines. That's why they use psyllium. It's very mucus forming. It forms a heavy mucus down there, which is healing and soothing to the intestines. You better go back and check with his not lack of knowledge, his source of knowledge, and question it very, very severely. You can question him as many times as you like.
One other thing on the small intestine, Ian, that's very, very good is the pawpaw, because you'll find the papain enzyme will work in any pH, and of course you got tremendous pH variation from one end of the small intestine to the other. And if you read up on the 12 points in the mature green pawpaw, one of the things you'll find is that it's a very powerful mucus and pus solvent, which means that all the sort of false linings and all the debris that's basically gumming up the small intestines you're going to get some good mechanical action in removing that from things like psyllium and alfalfa. But if you combine the pawpaw, either in the mature green form here, or the tablets, or the powder, or some good potent form, you're going to get a lot of enzyme activity that's going to do a tremendous job of stripping that stuff out. And actually, the two of them together, like say the psyllium and the pawpaw, or the alfalfa and the pawpaw, will be very effective.
Just a question for you, John. Where do you draw the line with groups or families of people that have the I can't word pattern, and how long do you hold their hand for?
How long do you hold their hand? I don't have an answer for that.
It's just blue. What?